From boyhood to abdication, the story of the 1860 royal stamp connecting Edward VIII to the Duke of Windsor's former crown. In 1859, Queen Victoria declined an invitation to visit the United States. She reluctantly sent her immature 19-year-old son, Bertie Albert Edward, the Prince of Wales, in her place along with the 5th Duke of Newcastle as his chaperone and advisor, and her most trusted British diplomat, the 1st Earl Lyons, as an escort in 1860. Despite knowing the trip would make him the first royal to set foot on American soil since the American Revolution, the Queen never expected its success or that she would be pleased with him. During their brief stay in Boston in October, the 5th Duke of Newcastle and 1st Earl Lyons made a purchase. On October 18, 1860, they commissioned and acquired a copper-engraved stamp of the British royal seal from C.J. Peters and Son in Boston. This stamp was intended for a royal engagement in Boston, marking a special event in the prince's life. 40 years later, Prince Albert's mother, Queen Victoria, died, and he became King Edward VII. His grandson, the future King of England, Edward VIII, was only 7 years old. That stamp would be gifted to his grandson at 13 years old and found in his possession when he died. 29 years later, his grandson Edward, known to his family as David, would become the King of England, Edward VIII, in love with Wallis Simpson, a divorced woman, which shook the early 20th century. Their relationship defied royal norms, forcing the king to choose between abdicating the throne or not marrying his true love. He gave up his birthright and married Wallis Simpson. No longer the King of England, he became the Duke of Windsor. Consequently, the couple lived in royal exile, marginalized by the royal family's disapproval. Edward's abdication in 1936 allowed his niece, Queen Elizabeth, to ascend the throne in 1952. However, even 20 years later, in their final meeting, she declined her uncle's dying request to grant his wife the coveted title of Her Royal Highness. After the Duke died in 1972, the Duchess grew increasingly withdrawn. Royal historians such as Hugo Vickers report that Wallis Simpson was robbed, abused, sedated, and kept isolated until her passing in 1986. The abuse was orchestrated by a deceitful lawyer named Suzanne Blum, and the royal family would not intervene. After Wallis Simpson died in 1986, Mohammed Al Fayed acquired the lease of the Windsor's home in the Bois de Boulogne from the city of Paris and stated that he intended to turn it into a museum. Shortly after that, Sotheby announced the sale of her jewelry in Geneva in 1987. In 1997, after Princess Diana and his son, Dodi Al Fayed, died in Paris, Mohammed Al Fayed organized the 1997 sale at Sotheby's of the remaining contents of the Windsors, which was billed as the final chapter of Edward and Wallis's remarkable love story. The devoted social secretary of the Duke and confidant to the Duchess publicly accused Mohammed Al Fayed of mental and spiritual rape because he reneged on his promises to turn Windsor's Paris home into a museum. She insisted to the newspaper Le Figaro that Mr. Fayed had no moral right to sell the objects and that the French state could have stopped the sale under the protection of a museum to prevent Windsor's most personal possessions and memorabilia from leaving France. My excitement about the sale had nothing to do with the Windsor's love story or royal lineage. I have been a collector of Napoleonic objects for 50 years and amassed a collection that rivaled any museum. In the 1970s, a photograph of Edward at his desk in Paris caught my eye. 2 18th century rare and historically crucial Napoleonic snuff boxes sat on the desk, and I was captivated. I hoped these boxes, which I had never seen in any museum collection, had escaped the clutches of Suzanne Blum and were part of the sale orchestrated by Al Fayed with Sotheby's. Despite my thorough search of all 40,000 of the Windsor's objects, the 2 boxes were nowhere to be found. Not finding them was a disappointment, and I would continue to wonder about the fate of those boxes for another 2 decades. In 2019, the devoted social secretary of the Duke and confidant to the Duchess passed away. She had lived with the couple for 10 years in Paris and was a close friend of the Duchess for another 15 years after the Duke died. She was the last friend to see the Duchess alive in 1986. With her passing, many untold royal secrets are lost forever, but one was saved. In 2021, I discovered that the Benefit Shop of New York had plans to sell Ms. Metz's estate. This gave me hope that I might find the 2 missing Napoleonic boxes at that sale. When the catalog came out, the 2 Napoleonic boxes with a 19th century watch box were lot number 313, listed as 3 trinket boxes. I was thrilled and purchased the 3 boxes. Before her death, Wallis Simpson trusted the boxes to her closest confidants for over 2 decades. Janine Metz protected them for another 33 years until she died that year. I also noticed that lot 508, described as an antique lion and unicorn ink stamp, was for sale. It was a finely handmade engraver's stamp of the British royal seal, so I bought it too. When my package arrived, the seal fit perfectly into the old watch box, so I placed it on my bookcase for 3 years. When I got around to inspecting the box, I caught that the box lining, when lifted, revealed a hidden compartment that contained the 160-year-old original receipt for the seal. The receipt showed that the seal was made for the Prince of Wales during his trip to Boston in 1860. The auction house failed to find the hidden receipt and separated the stamp from its 1860 receipt. That receipt was part of the provenance that the auction house had missed. Despite knowing Janine Metz's 25-year friendship with the Duchess of Windsor Wallis Simpson, the auction house placed a sticker on the bottom of the box that read Benefit Shop Lot 313, January 21st, 2023. I peeled it back as carefully as possible. Underneath it was the remnants of an old sticker that read given to David 1907. The Duke of Windsor kept the seal in the box from 1907 until he died in 1972. I had unraveled the mystery of an almost forgotten seal that connected 2 kings from boyhood to their death.